All right, so we're going to get started, everyone. We have 62 people thus far, and people are pouring in. So I think we're ready to get this started. So good evening, everyone. My name is Karima Woodyard. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Student Involvement within the Division of Student Affairs here at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. I am also honored to serve as tonight's moderator for this important conversation titled Big Ten Women in Leadership Advocacy Roundtable, where our panelists will discuss how they have used their voice and platform to create real change during this pandemic. These women are amazing, and I am already fired up, as you can see, and I hope you are as well. We have been providing these engaging opportunities to celebrate and honor women for 4 to 5 years now. And this year, we are truly excited to commemorate 5 years of furthering the legacy of Dr. Jewel Plummer Cobb, scientific researcher and first African-American dean of Douglas College. We have an array of Women's HERstory Month signature events and social media campaigns during the month of March. Our theme for this year is reinventing your journey holistically in the age of COVID-19, which truly speaks to the impact COVID-19 has had on our overall community. On behalf of all of the panelists, on behalf of our guest speaker, our executive committee, we thank you for joining us today. And I invite you to visit steam.rutgers.edu for more information about all of the amazing initiatives that we have planned over the next couple of weeks, as well as to learn more about Dr. Jewel Plummer Cobb. Friendly reminder that this event is recorded and it will be shared on our Student Centers and Activities YouTube channel for you to view at a later date, as well as to share within your networks. And if you're a Rutgers student, please use the link in the chat to check in. So let's get started. I am sincerely honored to introduce an outstanding colleague and friend to bring greetings and help frame our conversation tonight. Dr. Joan Collier, or Dr. J, as we fondly refer to her here at Rutgers, serves as the Director of Institutional Equity and Strategic Initiatives within the Division of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement. Dr. J leads efforts and strategic initiatives to advance institutional equity and inclusion goals. Dr. J is an affiliate member of the PhD in Higher Education program faculty in the Graduate School of Education. She has more than 10 years of experience within higher education as a practitioner and educator. She is a first-generation scholar and alumna of Georgia State University and the University of Georgia. Introducing our very own, my friend, Dr. J.
Thank you, Karima. Uh-oh. I said I started my video. Did it go?
Yes, we see you.
Oh, y'all can see me?
And you,
lucky you. Okay, awesome. So welcome to tonight. I have my notes here. I'm gonna, I can see myself. This is delightful. I am all the things that Karima said. I have my notes here because my stutter likes to jump out uninvited when I'm excited, and the idea of advocacy always excites me. So I'll stick to my notes and then do a little ad-libbing, and then I'm turning it back over to the pulpit, as we say in church. Thank you for joining us for this Big Ten Women in Leadership Advocacy Roundtable, part of the Dr. Jewel Plummer Cobb STEAM Women's Empowerment Initiative. And a special thanks to my colleagues in the Division of Student Affairs and the Office of the Chancellor for making this event possible, and to the other organizers who worked across the Big Ten to bring additional voices into the conversation so it's not a flat conversation. Women's empowerment is my jam. It's what I've known all my life. My mother was my first advocate, and luckily not my last. Be they mentors, sister friends, organizers, and activists, sorority sisters, or fellow colleagues, women in FEMS have been some of my most closest confidants, thought partners, and biggest champions, and for that, I'm grateful. Advocacy is about supporting causes and ideas. That's the literal definition. I'm a bit of a nerd, And so words really matter. And so when I don't know, I just figure them out. It takes form through actions. Actions are verbs, right? Verb is our actionable pieces. We must do things to be advocates, right? We can say we value something, but until we take action, it's just something that we have in our head. We speak up if we're able to speak, if that's something that we can leverage. We sound alarms, right? We move with purpose. Sorry, somebody trying to call me. We move with purpose. We make choices to choose something else, right? Advocacy sometimes is making a choice to spend money here, not there. It's choosing not to work with Amazon this week because I believe people have a right to a sustainable wage and to organize their labor. We put our energy where our values are, right? That's how we do that. We leverage our power in service of the cause we are rooting for. When I think of advocates, a few folks come to mind. I'm a Black sorority woman. I'll make no bones about it. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Ooh, to the home team. And our first public act as a sorority in 1913, prior to the amendment that allowed women to vote, was to go out and march and say, women have a right to vote. We actually should have a right to vote. So these are Black women in 1913, okay, catch context, saying, not only do we get to vote, my Black behind gets to vote, we get to vote. That advocacy matters. It put them in danger. They went anyway, right? I think of Stacy Abrams, who is this cult classic now, who ran for governor of the state of Georgia, I think back in 2018, or somewhere in that range. Stacy Abrams lost that governor's race because of voter suppression. And Stacy Abrams believes in free and fair elections. She then took that energy and that brilliance in her networks, and she organized people, and she put infrastructures in place that allowed for people to be educated and be registered to vote, and actually getting people to the polls, right? That was her advocacy in action, not just in I believe in fair elections. I believe everyone should have access to the ballot boxes. I'm actually going to take action around it and bring people into this with me. And then I think of Georgia Gilmore, who founded the Club to Nowhere down in Alabama during the Montgomery bus boycott. Sometimes people think advocacy is loud. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it can be because it's too dangerous, right? And so you're saying, who is Georgia Gilmore? I'm glad you asked. She was a woman who said, I think she was a domestic, she was a cook, and she said, I know what I can do is I can cook, right? So I'm gonna cook this food, me and my homegirls and other people from the community who also cook, and we're gonna sell these plates of food. And then that money is gonna go to support the Montgomery bus boycott. Why does the bus boycott need money? Because the people aren't taking the buses, they need a way to get to work. And there was no Uber in the 1950s, it was not a thing. And so that money went to the cause that helped her believe in what she believed in. And so as I think about people whose advocacy provides models for us, I'm reminded that in our modern day advocacy, we are not doing this on our own. There are women and femmes who came before us who taught us the ways. We should always look back. Yes, Jillian, go look it up. It's super duper cool. There are ways in which we must look back to look forward. Let me get back to my script because I get real excited and I get off task. There's Ella Baker. There's Grace Lee Boggs. There's Brittany Cooper. There's Marsha P. Johnson. Claudia Garcia Lewis, one of my former colleagues. The list goes on. What's important to note is that we come from a long line of women and femme advocates. Our way is not possible without them. We sit in institutions of higher education that are historically white, that sit on stolen land, that we literally were not allowed to attend. Someone had to advocate for that. Someone had to say, I want a better future. And people came in and joined with them, and now we're here. Our way was not possible without them. Then we must work to ensure that others can go forward in part because of our advocacy. Advocacy is a way for us to do our part to make the world better, to make space for everyone to thrive. Advocacy isn't always loud, but it is always forward moving. Tonight's event showcases how women have engaged in advocacy to move ideas and justice forward. I'm thankful for their stories, most truly, certainly, their labor, their energy, and their courage, their fortitude, as advocacy isn't always trendy, it is not always fun, and Lord knows it is long suffering. It's long suffering and requires our full attention. And so as we move into this conversation and as folks share their stories, ask yourself a couple of questions, right? What is it that I'm passionate about? What does a just world look like to me? And then how do I support that? What resources do I have to leverage on behalf of that cause, right? And resources could be money, could be relationships, could be political capital, could be space, whatever it is. How can I work with folks already doing the work so that my advocacy isn't here, 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 and here, when collectively we can get more done, right? It's not these fingers, it's this fist, bop, right? And then how can I, if I'm working through working for a cause that does not directly impact me, right? I think everything is connected, but if it's not directly impacting me, how can I continue to center the people who are most impacted by the work, right? While leveraging my resources on their behalf. I think I'm at 5 minutes. I get excited. Advocacy is a verb. If nothing else, it's a verb. Every woman is not an advocate for every woman, right? And those of us who are advocates for justice are advocates for us all, particularly those who are marginalized, and marginalized as a verb, as in structures are in place to minimize and marginalize and minorize people, not folks are inherently not worthy, right? So how do we advocate for the worthiness and dignity of every person? Every person. And as women, as femme folk, how do we leverage what we have, the relationships that we build, right? The thoughtfulness that we engage in to survive and to thrive. How do we leverage those pieces to move justice forward? Karima, I'm done. I'm going back on mute. I'm looking forward to tonight's conversation. And I think that's it. Thank y'all for having me so much.
Oh my goodness.
Don't start, Karima, don't start.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. You know, one of the things that really stood out to me, and I mean, the whole discussion, the whole conversation that you just brought to us really resonated with me, but the collective part, you know, we have folks on our panel from different walks of life. We have a young lady who is currently in Japan tuning in with us. We have someone from University of Maryland and University of Minnesota having a conversation with us today. And, you know, it's really important for us to understand that together we can do anything, and that collectively we can do this. And so I'm really glad that you were able to share and shine some light on what advocacy is and how we can move forward with advocacy. And so again, we thank you for being here today. All right, so it is now my pleasure to introduce our amazing panelists. These women are outstanding leaders who have indeed used their platform on their campuses and throughout their journey. These women are fearless. I've had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks to talk with almost each and every one of them individually. And when I tell you their stories are great, that is an understatement. I'm so excited to hear from them today. For their full bios, please follow us on HERstory RU on Instagram to learn more about them. So our first panelist is Arielle Dublin, or Ari, as she is called by her community. Ari is a senior in health administration, minoring in public policy and finance. Ari currently serves as the student body vice president for the Rutgers University Student Assembly, or RUSA, as we call it on campus. Next up is Nabilia Prisatan. Nabilia is a rising senior at the University of Maryland, double majoring in philosophy, politics, and economics, and women's studies with a minor in Asian American studies. Nabilia is the Student Government Association Student Body President, Yes. Carla Segura is a 2007 graduate of Rutgers University. She currently works in fundraising for a New York City performing arts organization. All righty. We also have Marie Yomaka, and she is a senior majoring in biological sciences and minoring in chemistry. She is actively involved in RUSA and currently serves as the SAS Bush Senator, as well as other amazing leadership positions. Jael Karandi is a senior at the University of Minnesota, Carlson School of Management. She is studying finance and marketing with minors in leadership and business law. She currently serves as the ranking representative to the Board of Regents and the chair of the student representatives to the Board of Regents. And last but not least, Nanette Dondi. Nanette is a senior at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, majoring in HR management and minoring in health administration and business. She currently serves as the president of the Rutgers United Black Council. We also have Lori Smith joining us as the co-chair for the planning of this amazing event. And Lori serves as the associate director for student involvement, as well as the advisor for RUSA. I want to thank you all for being here. We want to learn from you. And please note that our first question, we're going to go through some questions and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. So let's jump right in. All right. So advocacy seeks to ensure that people in society are able to have their voice heard on issues that are important to them and protect and promote their rights. I have asked our panelists to truly think about issues that impact the people within our communities and within the world around us. Because what we know is when we think about Black Lives Matter and the shooting of George Floyd, when we think about anti-Asian hate crimes, when we think about LGBTQ issues, and I can go on and on, what we know is that many of the voices in those communities are not being heard or even considered. So my first question is for all of our panelists. Writer and activist Audre Lorde said, there's no single issue struggle because we do not live in single issue lives. I want each of you to take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself, but also share what has advocacy looked like for you across multiple issues. Give us a glimpse into your advocacy journey and share what has been your point of pride. And we'll start with Arielle.
Well, number one, Karima, thank you so much again for introducing all of us. And thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. I'm looking very forward to this conversation with all these beautiful women across the Zoom call. And I wish we were able to do this in person, but Zoom is also even better because we're able to reach across the world, like with Marie over here, who's here in Japan, joining us this bright and early this morning to join us on this conversation. But I know I read this quote, and this was something that I was sitting and thinking about, especially this past year of just the pandemic. And I know the Black Lives Matter movement has really hit a spot in the country, a pulse. We had the election season as well. We had the storming of the Capitol. There's been so many things that has occurred this year that I have thought myself of what have been ways I have advocated for our community as a whole in New Jersey in ways that I have tried to touch the pulse across, the US as well. So a couple of points just to make for myself in ways that I've been advocating for us. And I know a couple of ladies who have been joining me as well on this journey has been, internally the pandemic. That has been something we have really pushed for women across the state, people across the state as well. I've been fortunate enough to be one of the vocal points for our DOH for New Jersey and really advocating for people to properly get vaccinated, properly finding resources to make themselves safe in the state, health-wise. I know for the Black Lives Matter movement, I partnered with Nanette and also phenomenal other advocacy groups on campus for Black people at Rutgers to make sure their voices were heard, especially after the death of George Floyd, unfortunately, in June during the midst of the pandemic. And other ways as well, we have touchstones, and I will be touching more on that down in more questions. We have partnered with the Big Tennis Association this year as well, different ways we could advocate as a whole to make sure students have been heard, from divestment. I know that was something we touched on last year, to also Black Lives Matter movement and making sure students have been able to be vocalized across the US. There have been times and points like this, as small as they might seem, and sometimes we feel like, hey, I'm not really making a dent. You are, and that's something I have to realize myself, is sometimes you don't really need to be that loud, as much as that's something we all wish for. That small little glimpse of hope does push for the next generation as well. Conversations we're having this year on reparation for students on campus, for Black students on campus. That's something I've been pushing for, in my term. And that is a door we have opened. And I know students are going to take that mantle. So I want to make sure everyone else is able to have time to talk and introduce themselves as well. But those are some ways I've been advocating for people in our community.
Thank you so much, Ari. So Jael, well, let's hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me on this panel, and Karima for introducing us and bringing all of this together. I think when thinking of points of pride in my journey through advocacy, there's many points in which I think, depending on where I was in my leadership, I was happy or prideful with what was going on, or I was proud of what I was able to accomplish. But I think one of the things that comes to mind is when I was the first Black student body president at the University of Minnesota, I was put into the role amidst some of the turmoil that was just going on and halfway through our academic year. And I was actually our vice president and then transitioned. But what was special about that was no one predicted the pandemic, right? No one knew it was going to come on. Nobody knew what we needed to do. No one knew what students even needed, because what does a pandemic mean at an institution? What does that mean for learning? What does that mean for the resources that we have? What happens when the world stops and no one knows what to do? And so that was a unique position. But what then happened in Minneapolis towards the end of my term in May was the murder of George Floyd. And what that did was completely send our city into a place where they could no longer claim Minnesota nice, right? Minnesota nice is not a thing. It is what we call more passive aggressive behavior that tends to ignore the issues that truly exist in favor of somewhat of a harmony that actually isn't true. And so what ended up happening as the student body president was I said, if this is going to happen 10, 15 minutes from our campus and we're going to sit here and allow this to happen and we're not going to say anything, not on my say so, right? Not when I'm here, not when I'm in this position, not when I have this voice, not when I have this place in which I can say something. And so I decided to ask our university to sever its ties with the Minneapolis Police Department within 24 hours, because in my opinion, that should have been what happened anyways. I remember a lot of people have asked me kind of, well, what was the thought process behind it? Well, do you think it was too soon? Do you think, well, quite frankly, I think they should have done it without me having to ask. I don't understand how a Minneapolis Police Department can have such a history of murdering Black men and women at 13 times the rate their white peer, and then you want to tell me that they're going to be on our campus? Yeah, no. So there was just so many things that to me needed to happen so that students understood that Black students do matter at the University of Minnesota. We all understand the history of policing and how it started with slave catching, right? Policing does not have roots in protecting Black people. It has never been that way. And as it continues to stand as its institution, it won't be that way. And to me, what our universities need to realize is they don't get to operate in silo. They don't get to be covered by society. They don't get to be protected by these woes, because what we then do is create these citizens, we create these students that go into the world without a franker knowledge of what's going on. And then they continue to perpetuate the same stereotypes and racist behavior that we see. And so when I asked our university to make this action and make sure that they did it within 24 hours, is because to me, there was a yes or no answer. There was not like a middle ground. There wasn't like a let's consult. There wasn't time for me to have a meeting with every administrator and walk them through why this was important. If they couldn't see that themselves, then we had bigger issues on who we're hiring. And then we can have that conversation right after you give me the answer about this one. So it was continuously this discussion of students needed to understand that Black students mattered, and they needed to understand it right away. I didn't want to wait for a statement full of fluff and honestly a bunch of condolences that could be saved. I wasn't waiting for them to give us a lot of information about how to find resources. What they needed to do was act, and they needed to act quickly.
Wow, I have chills. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Carla, do you want to share?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Karima. Thank you, Dr. J. And thank you to everybody on this panel. I'm so honored to be here. I can't even believe I'm here. Okay, so yeah, I'm a graduate, 2007 graduate of Rutgers. And in one life, I do fundraising for a New York City performing arts organization. In my real life, I am on the board for the New York Abortion Access Fund, which provides money to clinics to pay for people's abortions. And so the journey started really with me being frankly poor and needing an abortion and going to a clinic and realizing that, oh, wow, even in my, what I think is a liberal state of New Jersey, I couldn't go into the clinic without facing some severe harassment. And so I was frankly stunned. I mean, I was young too. And at the time I did not know about abortion funds, and I will talk a little bit more about them later, but I was stunned by it. And so I do say that abortion has changed me in a lot of ways, but not in the ways I think that people might expect necessarily. I started in this world, in this reproductive justice world, as a clinic escort, which means that after my abortion, I was like, what do I do what can I do? What is within my power to do so that people don't have to feel this way when coming into a clinic to exercise a right? And so I started as a clinic escort, and in New York City, actually, which faces a lot of harassment, and something I think, again, we might not think that we are in New York City, you know, a liberal city, a liberal state, and yet there's a lot of harassment. And so I've really met a lot of people and learned from quite a lot of people. And then I started at the New York Abortion Access Fund, which, like I said, there is an abortion access fund for New Jersey. I'm involved in New York. But yeah, we pay for people who cannot afford their abortions, and then we provide resources as well. And it's been really, it's great work, it's fulfilling work, and it's hard work, and particularly in this time of COVID. So I look forward to chatting a little bit more about that, but I will give some more time to our panelists.
Carla, thank you for your vulnerability, and we appreciate you being here. All right, so Nanette.
Hi, thank you everyone. Thank you, Karima. My name is Nanette Donde. As she said earlier, I'm the current president of the United Black Council here on campus at Rutgers, New Brunswick. I'm very happy to serve the position. I would definitely say, in terms of advocacy for me, as a Black woman, first of all, you know, there are so many difficulties that I face on the daily, and I'm being first generation and really advocating and speaking up for students who may not have, you know, the certain resources or opportunities when it comes to succeeding at school. Being the fact that Rutgers is a predominantly white institution, it can definitely feel as if, you know, there's no place for a Black student, you know, especially when it comes to the ways that how Black students have seen with administration or just in general when it comes to creating policies or being able to be held accountable. You know, students feeling, hey, you know, is there really anything that's really being done for me to make me feel like I have a place on campus, you know, and being able to at least have people listen and hear and not just, you know, put out fluff, as Jael said, which, you know, when she was speaking, I was just literally like emphasizing on clapping because, you know, I feel that to T, you know, as a Black student myself, you know, I do want to have the experience as a different person who may not have the same color as me. And sometimes when you see institutions who don't necessarily always have Black students, you know, at the forefront, it can sometimes feel as if they're not really a part of that core fabric, you know, when it comes to even as small things as like cultural centers or student organizations, being able to have resources, being able to, you know, have that transparency and saying, hey, like you have a place here. That to me is what really encouraged me to get involved in the first place. And also in general, when it comes to women's rights. And, you know, one thing for me this summer that stood out was the Black Lives Matter movement, when everyone during the summer was really speaking out, especially when it came to Breonna Taylor's death. That really hurt me because as a woman, a Black woman, I'm always thinking that could have been me. That could have, you know, Breonna was someone who, you know, she was an EMT. She was just as any one of us as Black women. And for me, I was very emotional because I felt the, you know, the genuine, you know, feelings that she had, her being a woman and being able to help people. And because of our system, the system failing her, the justice system failing her, her family, you know, it's kind of like a slap in the face. But then at the same time, I'm not surprised because the system that our country upholds, you know, as Jael said earlier, it's really based on systemic oppression and things that go back to the days of slavery. So it's really just something that, for me personally, as a Black woman, I do go hard for actions that really put Black women on the forefront and say, hey, we have a place here and we are just as worthy of love and support as any other person. And so when it comes to being on campus, you know, being able to work with student organizations, putting women at the forefront, and then additionally also being able to advocate for first-gen students, those who, you know, need more resources or opportunities to thrive, you know, those are the things that, you know, would make me, you know, passionate. And I don't want to take up too much of the time, but, you know, in general, what it means with advocacy, you know, it's not a one linear line. You know, there are several things that everyone can advocate for because we all fit into such different identities. And so that's basically what I would say in terms of my journey and what has gotten me passionate.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel like all summer or for the last couple of years, it's been, that could have been me, that could have been my brother or my niece, or and it's a scary feeling to have to deal with every day. So thank you so much for that. Marie.
Hello, my name is Marie. I am part of the SAS at Rutgers University, and I am so happy to be here. So to answer that question, so for me, I was never really into advocacy. I wanted to be a professional ballet dancer when I was little, and I wasn't gonna go to college, and I was so close-minded in that. But I actually, I developed a disorder at the age of 12 or 13. And when I came to Rutgers, I felt very, very ill. And I actually went to the dean of students with a referral from one of my professors. And the person I met, which was Halston, he was amazing. So he advocated for me and helped me get the treatment that I needed. And also, once I got back on campus, he helped me transition into campus. And that's when I met a lot of my great friends, including Ari, who actually inspired me to get into advocacy because they were also part of, you know, student government and other organizations. And so I kind of just went in, just, you know, put my foot in the door, and I realized how much power you can have when you're involved in, you know, when you're really involved with the community, and to ensure that, you know, no student or, you know, anyone has to go through and be ignored or marginalized in a way. And I was lucky enough to have been surrounded by amazing people who had helped me and advocated for me, but not everyone has that. And I think that was my main goal when I, you know, really got into, you know, student government and everything. And when I advocate, I just, you know, I love to share my experiences because I know it's very unique to other people, having moved from all over the world and being in new places all the time. But I also understood that even though I had a rich experience, I still didn't really understand the community and the people around me and the diversity that the world includes. And so I just love hearing other people's experiences and other people's opinions. And I feel like that enriches my my argument when I do advocate for things, and to make sure that I'm advocating for the right things and in the right ways. So yeah.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your story. That took a lot of bravery to share that. So thank you. All right, Nabilia.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. Just a quick recap. My name is Nabila. I'm a junior at the University of Maryland, and I'm currently serving as the student body vice president. So I know we're talking about advocacy, but I think one thing that can pinpoint it really is like my introduction to feminism. I am a women's studies double major, and I think for a lot of my life, I was very confused on who I was. Growing up as like an Asian American Muslim at a very predominantly white high school, I think you get really confused of who you are. I've had teachers who say like, you're the only person that they're going to see past these walls, like pretty much like giving me a narrative of like, you're going to be tokenized, like keep up your best self. And so I think that stuck with me for a while. It was difficult for me to really understand who I was, and then difficult to understand like what I really cared about. And that was, I think, I didn't really understand who I was until I started taking women's studies courses. And my first class was actually Intro to Black Women's Studies and Theories of Feminism. And so, the University of Maryland is really great because we have a Harriet Tubman Women's Studies department, and we're really rooted in intersectionality, Kimberly Crenshaw and Audre Lorde. And I think when I understood that feminism wasn't just about what you saw in the news, it wasn't about like the white narrative, and that I had a place in it, it was really important for me to like strengthen my voice. And so I think I carry on that value so much of making sure that we're not taking care of like, in terms of maybe the voting rights, it's like making sure like not just a small portion of people can vote, but all women can vote. Because there really wasn't until the late 1900s where we were able, where all women were able to, with the Voting Rights Act and different immigration laws. And so I think what like a big source of pride for me is just that I, look for coalitions, and I collaborate with the people who may not have a voice. And so either that be through like uplifting like the Latinx community, helping with the ICE contracts at UMD and removing them, or it'd be helping other people in the Asian American community with the anti-Asian rhetoric, or creating a police advisory council to create reform so it's not damaging to our Black communities and people who in the sexual misconduct prevention. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much, Nabila. All right, so Dr. J.
Oh my gosh, y'all are so amazing. So shout out to all the student government people. I was student body president when I was in college, so whoop whoop, all that good jazz. I wrote my notes down because I get hype and I need to keep it together. So I've been Black and woman girl my entire life. That has required advocacy. My mother was clear about that. But I was very churchy. I grew up in a very homophobic ecosystem, right? And so for me, advocacy had to change the focus to community care at some point in time, and learning about other communities, learning about how people live, understanding that the things I want for myself, I should also want for other people. Shout out to the name drop for feminisms, and particularly Black feminisms. Y'all can't see my bookshelf back here, but it is like, heaven. And so what I wrote in my notes is that advocacy journey required an ongoing learning of new ideas and strategies, and a heap of self-awareness. And parts of that I could act accordingly, particularly around experiences and identities and ideas that weren't directly related to me. So ability, my sense of ability, that's the most transitional identity that we'll have. We can be just fine today and disenfranchised from our ability to move and access resources in 2 seconds. That's around sexuality. I am heterosexual, so thinking about what that means in terms of advocating for folks who are along the queer spectrum. I'm cisgender, so rethinking what it means. How do I advocate for folks whose gender puts them in danger, not because they're wrong, but because our society is like, oh no, prison abolition, etc. And so the required unlearning of selfishness, the required unlearning of if I have it, no one else can have it, that had to go. And a lot of that happened through the liberation practices of Black feminism that says, you know, the most restricted person must be free for us all to be free, or we are all then kind of screwed, right? Like we might think we're winning, we might have a little more proximity to power, but then we are always still restricted in that. And if we want to be unrestricted, then we have to do that. I made a note here, I'm still working that out in practice. For me, I'm Christian, so there's heaven and then there's not. And so this ain't heaven, so stuff isn't perfect, but it doesn't mean I don't have to work it out. And so that means for me, leveraging what I can, be it my time, be it my money, be it my social capital, be it my degrees, so people think I'm smart. I am smart. But if they don't know I'm smart and they see a PhD and they find credibility in that, then lending my voice to something might be helpful. Sometimes it's my physical presence. I have trans non-binary people who I love dearly, and sometimes it's my physical presence that I have to offer so that folks don't break boundaries and try stuff that they would try if it was just my loved one there. And so that's what it looks like for me. But I'm also, I think, old lady gang on the phone. I'm in my late 30s, good and seasoned. So I'm hoping, shout out to the grown folks. All of y'all are adults, but you know, to the folks who have made a couple more trips around the sun. So that's what it looks like for me.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. And Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Smith. I'm Associate Director of Student Centers and Activities in the Office of Student Involvement. My entrance to advocacy started in college. I was grateful and lucky to join a sorority, Delta Delta Delta, who supported our commitment to community service and urged me to get a degree in women's studies. Through that, they supported me to join student government, where we advocated for disability rights and access on campus. That student government sent me to a conference in New York City on reproductive freedom and advocacy to learn organizing skills. And I was fortunate to meet a student at Rutgers University way back then, who was heavily involved with advocating at Rutgers for access to higher education for the masses. And I was so impressed with him and his story about the activism culture at Rutgers that I kind of followed that in the back of my mind. And when I had the opportunity later in life to join Rutgers as a staff member, I jumped on board because I wanted very much to be a part of a community that supported young activism the way that I think Rutgers does. I went on through women's studies to be introduced to intersectional feminism and the various different ways that things like literacy and issues around the world can impact the women's experience and ability to thrive and positively impact their communities. And so I've always supported libraries and other types of literacy actions. But probably the biggest way that I've made a mark in terms or leverage is, I think, a key word in how do you leverage your activism. Where I have found my leverage was actually in my job at Rutgers. I serve as an advisor to student government, and I serve as an advisor to many political social action student organizations. And so by helping them plan their actions and develop skills to organize, I think has been the gift I feel like I've been able to give, is helping others, they maximize their voice. And I've been proud to have helped support many different actions here at Rutgers and see so many students thrive and grow into alums that give back to their community at very meaningful levels. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I just want to know, I'm an emotional mess over here. Your stories, I mean, I have chills. And so if you see me kind of put my face down a little bit, it's because I am just, first of all, I'm proud of all of you. And second of all, your stories really resonate with me. So thank you for sharing and thank you for your vulnerability. So my next question is for Marie and Annette. Sometimes as leaders, we need to use our voice for others, for causes that do not directly impact you or your community. How do you show up when advocating for causes that don't directly impact you or your community? And this is for Marie and Nanette.
Thank you. So I think that's a great question. I actually often found myself in situations where people were discussing things that I had no experience with. I'm, a bio major, not majoring in anything that's related to a lot of these social actions. And I often just sit there and listen to a lot of different opinions, because one person can say one thing and I'm like, oh, I agree with that. But then another person says another thing and I'm like, what was that? So I think being open to listening to all different ideas and really sitting with those ideas and, trying to kind of navigate through them and trying to come up with your own ideas about it after listening to multiple ideas, and then incorporating also your own experiences is like a great way to kind of ensure that you have a good idea about what you're going to advocate for, as well as being vulnerable and saying, you know what, I don't really know much about this topic, and asking others and learning about it. Because I think in order to make big and impactful changes, you have to really be open to other ideas, diversity, other types of people, being open to anything that's new and saying, no, I don't know much about it. And it's more listening than speaking, I think.
Yes, thank you. Nanette?
Yes, definitely. And I would agree with what Marie said earlier about listening. I think it's so important to have active listening skills, because one thing I've realized is if you don't listen, I say listen before you speak. Actively listen to people. Don't just always be quick to say something just because you want to say something about it, because when you're not listening, you're not going to really understand the issues at hand, and you're not going to be able to advocate for those issues if you want to advocate for them. So when it comes to, trying to solve problems or issues or conflicts, being an ear, an active listener, being even a shoulder to cry on, because sometimes when you ask for help and you're hearing somebody's story, if you're just going to keep having answers to the questions or responses, it doesn't really show that you're listening. And so when it comes to issues that don't necessarily revolve the things that I'm passionate about, I would reach out, lend a hand, and just be like, hey, how can I help? I would ask, is there anything that I should do? Right. And a great example I would say is when it comes to the anti-Asian hate crimes with the pandemic, right? I see a lot of parallels when it comes to, in general, just racism and just discrimination in general. And at the end of the day, in a society that groups certain groups as marginalized, underrepresented, minority, right? This name minority. I sometimes see it as, okay, we may not be the same color, you may not understand my issues, I may not understand your issues, but to be divisive and not come together and, collaborate in terms of really advocating for change, I feel like it defeats the whole purpose. I feel like if there's the more division there is, excuse me, I feel like that takes away from that, that unity that could really help the person in the bigger picture. So, but then there are also some times where I'll be like, listen, I don't always need to step in, but I'm there to listen and understand, okay, like I hear you and I'll be there for you. But if this is not my place, I'm not going to just step in just because I want to step in, but I'll be understanding. So say there's an issue that I may not necessarily understand because I can't really feel it from their perspective. I can't really experience it because I'm not in their shoes. I can't necessarily put myself in somebody else's shoes, but I'll be there to at least empathize with them. You know, I think there's definitely a difference between empathizing and putting yourself in somebody's shoes. So I think just being able to be an active listener and, you know, being able to understand the issue is something that I would say has helped me when it comes to understanding issues that are not really, you know, my forte, I would say.
I think if I can just add one quick comment on that, I think it doesn't always require action. Like advocacy doesn't require action. Sometimes it's about being aware of issues that are around you that you may not be, that if it doesn't apply to you, you don't recognize it until someone tells you. And so I think having that, you know, ability to listen and to want to learn from others and seeking that knowledge, I think is that in itself is great advocacy, I think.
I love that. And what I especially loved about that was when the part for first and foremost about active listening. You know, so many times we show up in spaces and we're always the one talking instead of listening. And sometimes when you are the one talking all the time, you miss the point. And so really taking time to step back and listen, but taking it even further is you doing the work to educate yourselves about the issue that is occurring and why it's impacting others in such a significant way. Not expecting them to educate you, but you taking the time and really educating yourself, I think is critical. So I want to thank the two of you for your responses. All right, so our next question is for Carla and Arielle. I want you to share a time when you or your student organization, group, workplace, etc., did not show up or speak up for a marginalized group and or an issue. What held your group back? And what did you or your group learn? And what were the reactions? And what might have been what might have made the situation different?
That's a great question. I was actually, when I read that question, I was thinking, what are some ways we haven't stepped in? So I can give you guys kind of a story last year. So fun fact, I'm a transfer student. So this is actually my second year at Rutgers. Last year I was actually fortunate enough to join RUSA as well, beginning of my academic journey at Rutgers as well, serving as a Douglas Women Rep. So it was a great journey becoming VP. But I know last year, around my fall semester, there was a time when I think there was a conflict of interest that was occurring with our student newspaper misrepresenting some blackboards giving a protest on the topic at hand that was very important. And because of that, the Black orgs asked our current president at the time to step in, and our SGA did not, and stepped in a couple weeks later. But that did show and had lasting effects for the rest of the year of ways our student government did not step in. So I think due to that, and when I was running last year, and my role, especially this year as a Black woman, was making sure that we uplift a lot of minority groups on campus, specifically Black students as well, because representation matters. I always told my team, sometimes we don't always need to be in the conversation, you know, and sometimes our voices are not heard, and we don't need to have our voices heard, you know, because we have groups like Nanette here, who is our UBC president. We have other groups as well on campus that are supposed to be there to advocate for those students heavy on, and we are there to support. But it's also important as a student government, being the only student government on campus, to be there and be representing of those voices and uplifting them. So I think that was an important lesson last year. And that's something I always remind our team is, it is important when we hear something, it's important when we are aware of something to make sure we support people. It is very important of that, and recognizing, hey, I am there to make sure you're okay. Hey, I am there to make sure your voice is heard, and what are ways we can help. Because if you don't even give that helping hand, if you're not even there to make sure they're okay, then what really is the purpose? You know, what really is the purpose of your job? Is that there as a title? Is that there just to look pretty, to have posters out, to send an email? You know, it's really there to advocate for students. So that was a very important lesson. And that's something I always have carried for myself. But I know for SGA as a whole, that is something that we make sure to consistently represent and instill in our apartments and all of our representatives as well. So if you're representing a campus, if you're representing a student org, if you're representing anybody, it doesn't matter your health and wellness, PR, nothing. You got to make sure that you are advocating for student groups as a whole on campus.
Thank you. Carla, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I really appreciated this question too, especially now. I've faced a few situations, and as a clinic escort, really, there's a lot that happens on the sidewalk in front of a clinic, and these conversations about how to best serve the people who are visiting your abortion clinic is whether it is actually fruitful to have your presence there to begin with. Are you adding more stress? Are you creating more stress? And having those conversations. And we had to have those conversations quite a lot. And ultimately it was decided not to engage with protesters and things like that, so that it just didn't add to the chaos. And currently in abortion rights work, there is a difference between the fight for reproductive rights and the fight in reproductive justice. Reproductive justice was founded by Black women, and right now, if you look across the spectrum of abortion funds, quite a few of them are now majority white women. And so having this internal transformation in these abortion funds and these conversations is so important, because you can really harm your clients if you are not, we call them clients or callers, if your organization doesn't really reflect who's calling you. You're making decisions on behalf of the people who are calling your organization. And if you're not looking internally and doing the work of listening and stepping aside when you need to, and like Dr. J said, there are ways to help that don't necessarily mean you need to be at the table making decisions. And so we are looking internally now as an abortion fund to make sure, do we reflect our callers? Who are we? Where do we come from? And having difficult conversations. There are difficult conversations to be had where, and again, also Dr. J mentioned abolition work. It's knowing when to step aside and also when to speak up. And right now we envision this particular abortion fund that I'm involved with in being more of a mutual aid, less of a charity organization. And becoming that means some people really do have to step aside and let Black women and trans and gender nonconforming individuals really take the lead, because they have been doing the work for so long, and it's been really it's been at the forefront of our conversations. And I think we're going through a really great transformation. So yeah.
I like that, because on one hand, it's we didn't respond, but we regrouped. And next year we did a better job. And then there is let's take a step back and really understand before we respond. Because like you said, Carla, you can harm the people that you're serving if you do not do that. So I want to thank the two of you for that response. All right, so our next question is for Nabilia, Jael, and Dr. J. So there's several metaphors that are used to describe women's experience in leadership. We have the glass ceiling, the glass escalator, the glass cliff. I can go on and on. I want you to share your metaphor or leadership style as a self-identified woman, and what advice do you have for other women leaders looking to use their voice to create real change?
Yeah, so I can start off. I'm thinking about the experience that I've had where people have kind of questioned my competency or questioned my ideas. And honestly, at times it does get a little bit discerning. I do sometimes, like, I think when the way that I lead and the way that I like to set an example is I like to do a lot of brainstorming, shout out a lot of ideas. And in response, I get a lot of, oh, Nabila doesn't know what she's doing. She doesn't know how this system works. I don't care about the system. That's why I want to innovate and I want to try new things. One example I would say is with our student government. We are not seen in the best light with a lot of different cultural groups. And it's because we only work with them, or historically, we've only worked with them and collaborated with them when it's election season. And so I wanted to change the system on that. I wanted to be the one that was, reaching out, even doing like Instagram lives for like Latinx Heritage Month or ABI Heritage Month or Black History Month. And that was not taken well by a lot of the people who, had been here for the last couple of years. And so I would say for the other women leaders, I'd say find your support system, find your allies, because you will get gaslighted, you will be turned down, and people will make you feel less than. But all you have to do is go back to your people who will support you and your mentors who will guide you, because just know, there are people who will put you down, but just know that it's that's a minority and you need the support system.
Thank you. Jael, you want to chime in?
Yes, as Dr. J just gave me the way. Thank you. I think for me, it has always been this idea, this mantra to remain relentless. I think there's a lot of barriers, there's a lot of doors, there's a lot of ceilings, and we could talk about being the first on and so forth, but people want to focus on that, but then often will then not listen to what you say after that. It's not enough just to get a seat at the table. You're going to hear me when I get there. You know what I'm saying? So it's a matter of people understanding that you can't just put Black women into representational roles to say you have a Black woman on your board, right? I'm not there to be your proxy. I'm not there to be your cookie cutter picture. I'm there to speak. I'm there to make decisions. I'm there to have input. I'm there to have the second say and the third say. And as long as I'm not done, I'm going to keep speaking. And so I often say it's remaining relentless, because people are going to tell you no. That is inevitable. No one's going to just open the door and tell you to walk right into it. But the thing about Black women and women who are in leadership is we're strategic. Right? We know what we're doing. We know we're maybe 30 steps ahead before you even realize that I made my first step. So it's remembering that in our journey through leadership and anything that we do, if you are the first, if you are breaking that ceiling, you are setting precedent, right? That's a huge responsibility. It's absolutely something you shouldn't take lightly. And it's not just about you. You carry so many women and so many other people sitting right next to you when you're in these roles. It's not just you and the 30,000 students you're representing, but it's all the 30,000 Black young women and girls who are going to be at that institution one day as well. So it's remembering how important that is. But that means when you get there, when you have that weight, know that you have so many more people behind you. You get to speak as loud as you possibly want to, because you're not sitting there alone. There's often this idea that once we get into rooms, we're supposed to be so thankful that we're there that we sit down and we shut up and we're okay with it, right? I'm so grateful you gave me this opportunity, not understanding that often we exceed so many of the qualifications that are asked of us, yet we tend to be the most humble, most quiet, and most submissive in those moments because we've been told to. And I think more and more it's learning that, no, I'm in this space, I'm here, and you can tell me no as many times as you want to. That doesn't mean I'm going to stop. And so to student leaders, to women, I always tell them that as much as you want to give respect to administrators, or you want to give respect to authority figures, and you want to deal with respectability politics and so on and so forth, they also need to be giving you that same respect back. That energy has to be simultaneous, because at the same time, your energy, your efforts, all of that are resources, and time is money, and we're not here to waste it. So I think at the end of the day, my mantra has always been remain relentless. You're going to get a closed door. You cannot promise yourself success every day, but it's a matter of understanding that when you're in that room, you deserve to be in that seat, speak, be at that table, empower yourself, because so many women are watching, but also you're paving the way for so many other women to follow after you.
Yes, remain relentless. Whew, thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. J?
I love y'all. Couple things. I think Audre Lorde said, your silence won't save you. That's one piece that stays with me. I'm an extrovert. I talk a lot. Sometimes I think I talk too much. And I remember This is like my spiritual gift. God didn't give me a voice to be quiet so I can do it. I can do it the what I want. That's one. I love movies, Effie White and Dreamgirls. Curtis tried to play her and take her money, and she walked upon him at the end. And she said, this time Effie White's gonna win. And so that reminds me that you won't win every day. You really will not. Advocacy is not about, did I win every day? You're not. Stacy Abrams was cheated out of a whole election and channeled Toni Morrison and said, you can be angry and then go to work. And sis whipped up a whole region and she lost. She got death threats. People call her all kinds of names, disrespect her work, disrespect her name, disrespect her capital. This time Effie White's gonna win. And then the other piece that I keep to myself to remember is I'm not the first woman, Black woman, fat woman to go through this, whatever this is. Pick this, I'm not the first one. Our elders living and our ancestors past have taught us lessons if we are willing to learn. And so the learning for me is central. And in my younger days, my mantra would have been knucking and bucking and ready to fight, right? I'm rocking stilettos, right? I'm ready to bop, 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 tear it up. And it's not that I don't want to do that anymore. I understand my literal position in the institution, right? I am the administrator. I'm the one that students be like, she ain't doing nothing. That's what y'all supposed to do, because that's what I was doing when I was y'all's age. But as administrator, I can't go box my chancellor in the head, right? I can't go fight my president in the street, right? Like Dr. Holloway might be like, girl, what are you doing? I would get put out, right? Okay, cool. So then how do I actually work to get my work done within the systems that we have, even as we're shifting systems, right? Even as in my student affair days, I would say, we are trying to change the wheel while the bus is moving. It's bumpy, it's clunky. My foot's gonna get toe up, right? I'm gonna get boxed. Like there's so much is gonna happen. So I have to remember, I'm not gonna win maybe today, right? My wins are long haul, 5 years from now, some of them. There's some low hanging fruit pieces. Some of that stuff is not happening right now. White supremacy was here way before I got here. My elders and ancestors paid ways. I got to figure out how they did it and translate it to now and reimagine in some new stuff, right? But that's just kind of all the stuff that's in my head all the time. So this time, Effie White's gonna win. Don't give up. Stacey Abrams is always, she's a fat body, gap having, kinky hair, twisty, wish you would tell me. She is, I can't curse because I'm work, but she's a bad behind person. She wishes you would. She invites you in, even as she's daring you to try, right? And then looking back, we're not the first to do this. We come from long lines of people who've done this. Never let someone tell you, people are going to tell you what they want. Never believe that there aren't people who haven't tried. Even if we don't know them by name, know they exist. Seek them out. Seek people in other communities who are doing what you're trying to do. Emulate that, learn from them, cite them, but learn from them. That's my mantras for the peoples.
I love
Really
it.
quick.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add on to something Dr. J said about how many people have come before us, because I think we often, and I don't think we forget, but I think we've been told we need to forget, and it's also been omitted and it's also been suppressed and we talk about the history, right? And we talk about the fact that we teach about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, and it kind of just ends, right? Like nobody else existed. Like we have to talk about these conversations where we're not educated on our own history. And so what's been taken up is our community has said, but I'm going to tell you. They might not tell you, but here, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to put you on game because you need to know where you come from, because it's not about the fact that it should put pride in you. It should light a fire in that you stand on these shoulders, right? That you're not just by yourself. And because they have tried, they moved it an inch and you got to keep going a mile. And then the next person goes another mile. It's about this fact that we're building on these successes that have happened so far before us. The reason we're at these institutions is no doing of our own. The reason we're in these spaces, the reason that we have Black students at white institutions is no doing of our own. So when we're talking about these things, we have to remember, Dr. J just reminded me, like, these things were taken away from us. They didn't want to write our history down. They didn't want to teach us our history, but we know it. So on that, we get to stand on strong ground.
I absolutely love it. I love it. And I just want to say that part of advocacy is education. And so, yes, people have come before us, but I just did a presentation for some high school students from my hometown, and I had to remind them of who they are because they're not learning it in the classrooms. And so part of advocacy is education. And so I challenge each and every one of you to give back. One of my mentors, Dr. McGinty, always talks about lifting as I climb. And so part of lifting is letting folks know that you are a queen. And this is how queens act. And then that part about being at the table, being invited to the table, but you're going to hear me. I love that because imposter syndrome shows up in our lives every single day, doesn't it? And sometimes we have to remind ourselves about being resilient. And I appreciate all of you for your responses. All right, so we don't have much time. And so if you have a question, if you're in the audience and you have a question, I invite you to put that into the Q&A so we can get to that. So my next question is for Jael and Nanette. When it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion work, what does accountability mean and why is it important?
I'll go first for this. I really just want to say that this has been a term that has been said so many times in my experience as a student at Rutgers, but I feel like it's really important to understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion should be used more than just a blanket solution, but actually that we're making sure that students are included, not just saying that they're going to be included, but actually providing and making way for students to be included. And so when it ties into accountability, as we've talked about earlier with people in positions where they work on, strategic planning in order to make sure that students are able to have these opportunities, specifically talking about Black students. I think when it comes to like equity and inclusion, it's more than just saying, oh yeah, let's recruit more Black students, but how can we intentionally recruit them and also provide them packages and reasons for them to stay? Because we do know that there are some students who choose either not to come to Rutgers or they choose to just transfer because they truly feel like maybe it was not the right place. And this goes for all institutions, not just necessarily Rutgers, literally every institution. But I would say that DEI needs to be used more intentionally and not just always slapped as a blanket solution saying, yeah, let's put everybody all together and make people feel welcomed, but actually saying, okay, yes, you're welcomed, but here's how your place and your voice, your presence is appreciated, and actively, not just passively, but actively. And I think once students see that and feel that, then in general, like DEI will become more effective, because we've seen so many committees and, opportunities for diversity and inclusion. And trust me, we all know that, there are individuals, even students, who really try to push for that. But it's really important that we understand that we have to also hold ourselves or just those in positions accountable to make sure that it's used as an actual solution that will in return make sure that all students feel like they have a place on campus.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. And I think what comes to mind for me when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion is I find that term to be somewhat difficult, and it's been coined and it's been used in very different ways. And I think it has some implicate meanings that I don't tend to agree with, but in its aggregate and what it means to necessarily assist in our different populations at our universities, I think people get really defensive when they hear accountability. They're almost like, how dare you hold me accountable to something I promised you? It's a very interesting discussion with administrators when you're bringing up their values, and they almost seem to be frustrated that you're holding them accountable to things that they've already put on their website that they told you that they were going to do when they recruited you. So there's this discussion that comes to mind, in my opinion, of any time I've asked a university official or administrator that I'm holding you accountable, it's something you've already told me. You agreed to this without my doing. You told me that you valued Black students. You told me that diversity and inclusion was important. You told me that you had all these measures to increase diversity, to provide these thought-provoking things, to support your students. You've told me all of these things. What I'm simply doing is letting you know you're not doing it. And when somebody's not doing something, we tell them. Now, where this becomes a matter where I don't tend to argue or tend to have debate with our administrators on is we are paying our institutions. It's really a high time that they realize there is no institution without your students. So the money that I'm paying as an investment into this institution for a service, if I'm not receiving my return, then I'm going to tell you about it. Black students at our universities have consistently received less ROI on any investment, been treated completely different from their peer, and then we're supposed to just be thankful that we're here. We're just supposed to be so happy that I'm at this predominantly white institution where my professors are constantly hurling microaggressions and nobody seems to care. And we have these racist incidents and the police are here, but I'm just supposed to be so happy I'm here and not supposed to say, I don't care if there's 6.3% of us are paying tuition. So at some point, our institutions have to realize that they have a responsibility, a fiduciary responsibility at that, to respond to their students. They are our agent and we are the principal. It is not the other way around. So the institution has to do something. And it's not about our administrators, actually, it's about our faculty as well. When we let our tenured faculty get away with these itty bitty things because they're tenured, or we allow them to sit in these spaces and make these type of things towards students because they're faculty and academic freedom and so on and so forth, well, Black people have been asking for their liberty and freedom forever. You know what I'm saying? Angela Rice said something that is so important for us to remember is, you know, our Constitution promises life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and we're still stuck at life. When you think about that and you sit there and understand that we're asking for our right to existence, when you bring it down to humanity, you can't sit here and debate with me about these things. And yes, these matters are of life and death. We know they are. We know that they exist and we know that they do something. So when our institutions are being asked, to me, actually, it's a demand because I'm paying you, because I've already put my money into this institution. Otherwise, you wouldn't operate. Our public institutions have two funding streams, the state and their students. And we all know state funding is going significantly lower. So what are you going to do to make sure that your students know that they're supported? When they hold you accountable, what they're saying is, my money's on the line and now you're playing with it. So let's talk about how we fix this. Because what institutions are going to start to see is Black students on the aggregate over the years will stop enrolling. We will start going where our money is better well spent. We will start going where we are more supported. It's no longer the fact that a corporate America can value diversity and say we want the Black student and we'll recruit at HBCUs, but then you want us to be here and all happy dandy. We're going to make it regardless. It is not contingent on your institution. So making sure that they understand that this service is going to be returned.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. All right, so we didn't have any questions in our Q&A, so we're going to move to our last question. So this question is for all panelists. So in her inauguration poem, poet Amanda Gorman said, "For there is always light, if only we are brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it." In 30 seconds or less, I want you to talk about how we as self-identified women can work collectively, like Dr. J said, to create change and opportunity for marginalized groups. How can we work collectively?
By listening. That's all I can really say, by listening, hearing one another, because perspective matters, you know, diversity matters. But when we have open ears and our mouths aren't always talking and we hear another person's perspective, we can collectively come together to uplift that one person that's hurting the most at the table.
Jael, you want to go?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with just making sure what Arielle said about uplifting, but also ensuring that you're doing it for somebody other than yourself. I think there's great I personally, so I'm also Christian, and to me, I remember when I became president, I said to, like my mom always said, too much is given, much is required. And it meant working on behalf of somebody else, but knowing that you're in certain places for such a time as this. So when you're there, uplift others, but do it for somebody other than yourself. So on the days that you get tired, somebody else is lifting you up.
I can go next. I echoing what has already been shared, but I would also say that in sharing my experience with abortion funds, you know, ask questions, always ask questions. Who's at the table? Who are you serving? Are you serving? Are you actively harming? Just always asking those questions too, and then continuing to educate. I will say, as far as like I said, reproductive justice, I will recommend an Angela Davis, just to think about, like a reading by Angela Davis, just to think about the history there, which is Racism, Birth Control, and Reproductive Rights. Just always learning about, like everyone said, who came before you, who's done the work, and are you actually asking the questions about who's making decisions? If that was at all eloquent at all.
Thank you. Nanette?
Yes, echoing what everyone has said, I really want to emphasize on listening and being there for each other, being, you know, as women, because as women, is, you know, we're also, sometimes we're put always in the back, or we're always not being heard. So when women, if we have each other's backs collectively, that creates this force, and it's so powerful. And I always emphasize that, you know, really stepping up for each other, uplifting. You know, women should be uplifting each other. We shouldn't be putting each other down, because at the end of the day, you know, we all have, you know, one thing in common as women. You know, and that's why I truly always emphasize on women empowerment, you know, being able to be prideful in the fact that I'm a woman, and seeing another woman who may be, you know, experiencing the same things as me, you know, that itself is empowering. So I just wanted to say, in my perspective, being able to support each other, listen as well, I think that creates in general like this unified force that can, you know, create so much more in change. And it doesn't always have to be even by actions. It can just be, you know, by words, or just, you know, being there for each other. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Marie?
So for me, I eventually want to be a doctor, and I had a mentor, and he told me, you know, women are very underrepresented in neuroscience, which is the field that I wanted to go into. And he actually holds seminars with people who are leaders, women who are leaders in that field, and they give talks monthly. And for me, I think that's like an excellent way. So like what you guys are all doing, coming to seminars like this, and reaching out to people women who are, you know, taking action and learning from them, and having the courage to, even if they are, you know, higher up, maybe they're, you know, the president of this big corporation or something, having that courage to ask questions, learn about what they're doing, and just having that courage to seek out, and to get inspired by other women who are taking action, I think is an excellent way.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I also want to echo what has been said about uplifting. I think it's extremely important to, well, first to pick out people who may be underclassmen, or anyone who's just younger than you, and to affirm their journey. I don't know, like at least for me, it was extremely important as a freshman to have someone be like, I see potential in you and you can do it. The second is really by listening and seeing how you can use your position or your privilege to uplift. I think in student government, what I have is access to administration that not all student groups and not all advocates have. So how do I connect those people and how do I advance those goals without taking like advantage of that, or taking control of that, like making sure that people can do their work while you just support them.
Y'all are so smart. I've been taking all the notes. The note I had for myself was Maya Angelou quote. She said that courage is what you need to practice all other virtues consistently. It's basically what she said. And courage is required because advocacy is not light work. It is not. Always, often it is not. And when we talk about doing that in collaboration with other people, particularly women and other femme folk, and this is Joan, I'm gonna step aside from Dr. J. Joan would tell you every woman is not someone that you collaborate with, right? Not because she is inherently bad, but because their politics are raggedy. There are plenty of women whose politics are raggedy, right? And I will honor them and respect them as people, but I don't fool with their politics. And so being clear that I have the courage to make the distinction between identity and politics and say, okay, actually, they are right on board with my oppression. I can't abide by that. I can't abide that, right? So then I need to find people who I can work with, be they women, femme, non-binary, trans, cis, however they identify gender-wise, and say, how can we work together to advance the cause? Because the cause is the end of the day's work. It's great when I find other women I can work with. Have your courage, get your clarity, and find some stuff to have joy around, because the work is hard, it's long. Brittany Cooper says that joy is what sustains us in our work. It provides the ability for us to have the capacity for joy, and that without that, we burn ourselves out. Courage, clarity, find you some joy, get some rest. Yeah.
And Lori?
Okay, for me, I think it's once you've decided to listen, you need to make sure you're listening to diverse perspectives. So surround yourself on social media with folks that are different than you. Join groups that are different than you. Or like me, completely change states or cities or whatever it takes to find people who can kind of help you grow your opinions in positive ways. But once you have listened, now you're aware. And now you have a responsibility. So you don't want to be complicit in perpetuating the oppression to the detriment of others. You want to be someone who, once you are aware, speaks, acts, and finds the way that you can have the most leverage to have the biggest impact you can. And if you don't know how to find that leverage, I'm going to make a plug that there's plenty of us around that are older and have tried these things before and have had successes. Find those people in your circle that can be a resource to you to find the ability to leverage your time and voice to make the biggest change you can.
So what I heard was listening is key. Being able to listen, being able to take time to really sit down and listen to those around you. No matter if it's good or bad, sometimes we only want to listen to what we want to hear or take in. And I don't mean just listening just to listen. I mean really taking it in and thinking about and reflecting on what they said. What I heard was uplifting. And I have to ask, because I want to ask the panel in the audience, like, when's the last time you really thought about and was intentional about lifting other women up? When was the last time you really took time to do that? And sometimes we're so busy in our lives that we don't make meaning to that and we're not intentional. But that is critical, because you never know how you can make someone's day. What I heard was asking questions, right? Asking questions. And I don't mean just any questions. Like Dr. J said, we don't want raggedy questions. I want you to really think through those questions. What about those questions that are going to educate you and to help you think critically about the world around you, about the people around you, about the marginalized groups that sit in the same classroom as you, or perhaps serve on the same board as you? Learning, taking time to learn. Google could be dangerous, but it could be an opportunity for you to put more in your toolbox. Don't expect others to teach you about their plight. It's important that you do the work. What I heard is be present. This is being present. But present also means that when you have someone who's part of your student government, or perhaps there's someone, in your classroom that, may not seem okay, right? You being present in the moment and being able to listen to them and thinking through with them what they might be going through. What I heard was women lifting each other up. Not just in March, right? All year round. What I heard was take action. What I heard was find joy. And what I heard is once you're aware, you have a responsibility. I want to thank all of my panelists today for being here. I have learned so much, not only about you individually, but, about myself. I've been 21 for almost 21 years, and I'm still growing and I'm still learning. But what I do know is Karima because of the women who came before me, because of my mom, because of my mentors, because of my friends, because of my village. And I want you to find that village. And I want you to hold on to that village. But more importantly, I want you to advocate and use your voice for change. I want to thank you again for being here. I want to thank our guest speaker, Dr. J, to our amazing panelists, as well as the Chancellor's Office and the Division of Student Affairs for providing these opportunities of engagement. I want to thank the audience. We encourage you to visit steam.rutgers.edu to register for our events hosted this month. Have an amazing night. And again, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you at the rest of our events this March. Have a good night.